Dear friends in Christ, when we look at the prophet Elijah, he has all kinds of things to say about the coming of the Savior, about the coming of God, about the coming of Jesus, really, as that spirit of Elijah proclaims the coming of Christ and preparing the way for him to come. Just as John the Baptist had that spirit of Elijah that was pointing to Jesus, who was about to come into the world. And then again, in the end of time, there will be a man, Elijah, who will proclaim that same message of the coming of Jesus. Now, before we get a little bit just persnickety about who this person is or who that might be who comes into the world, we can think of the prophet Elijah as someone that is a type. And he is a prophet who proclaims, like I said, the coming of Jesus, but he also proclaims Jesus, that is the God who loves us and cares for us. And that's that simple message that we can share with others in our life, whether that's our family, our friends, or people that we meet and that we know. And in this passage here in our reading for this evening, we have a passage that says something really special about this Elijah that is to come. It is that we should care for each other with our hearts, right? Fathers, he will bring the father's hearts to the children and the children's hearts to the fathers. Now that doesn't sound anything like what Elijah is supposed to do, right? It sounds like, wait a minute, what is the point of that? Especially in the end times when Jesus is maybe just about to come. So why is that important for us to have our hearts turned to each other? Well, as it says here, he'll turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. God's wrath comes because of violence on the earth. God's wrath comes in the end because he can no longer tolerate the sin that has gotten out of hand in this world. And at the point of the end, things will get so bad that even in our own families, our hearts will grow cold for each other. Jesus says in the New Testament reading here in Luke that family members will even give other family members up to be given unto death and is sacrificed to death. Now, maybe that doesn't seem like it's gotten that bad right now, but certainly there is a gap, right, between the generations. Sometimes people talk about the different generations, like the baby boomers and the millennials and Generation X and Y and Z and 0 and +4. I don't know. There are all kinds of different generation names, right? But I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about every family has specific people that are younger than them or older than them in that particular family. And every society at this very moment has people that are older and people who are younger. Can you think of the things that are different and how times have changed in the different generations? I think just a real glaringly obvious one is the idea of technology and how advanced we have become that has really completely changed our lifestyles, how we live our lives is completely different. And whether you've caught up with technology or not, sorry, but you probably haven't caught up. Because by the time you've caught up, then something else has taken that place. right? And you wonder how that works in education too. You wonder how that works for teachers who are trying to teach students, and if they really have to get on Snapchat in order to reach their students, or have to get how much time can you spend on the internet for learning and spending on tablets and computers and things like that. Well, thankfully, I don't have to worry about that too much. Let the teachers worry about that right now. But there's so many things that we can teach the younger generation. There's so many things that really the younger generation can teach us, right, at this point. They can teach us things that are for our benefit, and that's something that, I'm not sure that was really a thing before. Did younger people teach older people how to do things? It seems like it should be the reverse, right? It seems like for the generations and the way we've lived, that one of the things that really sticks out, besides technology, is just the idea of discipline, right? Discipline was different in schools. Discipline is different in families now. And most of the older generation is always a little bit surprised at how it doesn't seem like kids are being disciplined, or their adult children are disciplining their children. And that's kind of what it comes back to in the passage here, as it says, sorry, I can't read that too well, but God specifically says, "Remember the law of my servant Moses, the statutes and rules that I commanded him at Horeb for all Israel." That reminds me of discipline. That reminds me of the 10 Commandments that we try to teach the younger generation. And what could be better discipline than trying to follow the 10 Commandments and learn the difference between right and wrong? And that wrong things done, sinful things done, cause consequences in all of our lives. That's something that doesn't change. The 10 Commandments are always applicable to today, and they're actually even more applicable than we might even think. Right? Because it seems as though there's different kinds of sins with adultery and other things like that are at the forefront. And so we have to be able to teach our younger people these commandments, just as we do in confirmation. I was talking to one of the confirmation students, and I was talking to a group of students, and I said, what would we do if one of our friends is constantly swearing and cussing, and what would we say to them that would help them to maybe stop that behavior, or let them know that that's sinful? And so the student just said, well, you could say, there is this commandment that God has. Just, if you haven't heard of that one, there's the second commandment, And I actually was like genius, because, sometimes we forget that is a commandment, to not take the Lord's name in vain. So even the younger generation can teach the older or their peers about the difference between right and wrong. There's certainly that discipline that continues forward in our lives and is a key to the existence of our families and our society, and just having that accountability together. But that's not the only thing, right? That's not the only thing that kind of brings families together, that creates order in families, and that's not the only thing we need to be teaching our children, and that they can maybe pass on to others. Children certainly should obey their parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. That this is a commandment that has a positive outcome that you can see right away. Right? Follow someone who's more experienced, who knows something more about the subject. That doesn't just mean they have to be in your family. That could be another authority figure in your life that has had experiences, or maybe just an older person who might have some advice that you might be eating a meal in the fellowship hall, and they might be able to share some wisdom with you. That it may go well with you, right? And that is something we have to remember about the commandments too, is that they're not just so that we have to stop doing things, it's so that we can do lots of things that are good and loving toward one another. And so there is blessing. There's blessing in following God and following His commandments. There's blessing in discipline in that case. But there is something that sometimes gets in the way of good discipline. And that's actually, and this is Ephesians chapter 6, and this is verse 3 that it ends with here, and then verse 4 says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger." Wait a second, that seems like that should be the reverse, right? It should be, children, don't provoke your parents to anger. But in this particular passage, God has a message for fathers right away. In the Old Testament, or during the time when God talked through the prophets, the fathers didn't just mean fathers. It meant those people from the older generation. That includes mothers, and that includes grandparents. Those people who are those figures over top of us, and who are the older generation. But in this particular passage, it says, "Bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord." Discipline and instruction. Instruction itself, that doesn't just mean discipline, right? It's something a little bit different. And that includes something that the prophet Elijah, and not even only him, but every prophet, points to the Lord our God and His steadfast love that endures forever. That is part of the instruction. That is part of passing down the faith to the younger generation. It does happen the other way around, where you have kids that go to a Christian school, and then they end up going home and telling their parents about what they're learning, and even though their parents, don't come to church, or they haven't hardly been walking in a faith life of any kind. And so, again, both ways we can go toward each other. But in order for our hearts to turn to one another, we can be focused once again on the love of Christ. The love of Christ. And when Jesus looks down from heaven, and when God our Father looks down from heaven, and when He sees hearts turn to each other in love and forgiveness, that is what brings Him joy. And that is what gives Him patience to again continue to care and love for His people in His creation. In the end, guess what? We're all kids. We're all God's children. And that is what we will be when Jesus returns. Jesus will love us with the love that God the Father loved us with and cared for us. And we will be like calves who leap from the stall. Now, I bet there's some of you out there who are cattle raisers, and you know exactly what that is, right? But I notice it every time there's a big group of cattle, and right now they're kind of picking on the cornfields, right? And they're out there, and the older cows, they're down to business. This is the time to eat. We need to survive, And they're probably looking at those little baby calves that are jumping around, and be like, "Why don't you settle down? We gotta eat. We gotta survive. We gotta get through the winter." But those calves, they just continue to jump and run and have lots of fun out there in that field. And that's what we'll be like when Jesus returns. We'll be so glad that He has been loving us and forgiving us all this time. Jesus is the one who takes that discipline on Himself from God the Father when He was brought to the cross. Jesus was the one that was chastised so that we would be set free from our sins. It says that in Isaiah. Jesus received more than discipline. He received the punishment of our sin that has been placed on him. And that is what makes us free. That's what allows us to jump like calves because of the freedom that Christ has given to us. That's the message that we can bring to each other, that our hearts would be turned to each other, that the generation gap would be bridged. And I think in your own lives, as you go home tonight, or you think about it this week, think about a way that you could better understand the younger generation or the older generation, depending on where you think you would fall in there. And think about how Christ can bring that together, how you can have understanding of that older or younger group of people. There's something that we probably almost hear every Sunday, and that is, may the peace that passes all understanding guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. That is the message, the peace that Jesus has brought to us passes even that understanding and brings us peace together in Christ. And how strong we will be together, that strength that will be in numbers because of the love we have for each other, because of the discipline that God gives us in the Ten Commandments, and because of the forgiveness and grace that we find in Jesus Christ, our Lord. It is He who's coming, the one who saved you, the one who loves you, the one who shows you the way